Hey, little helpers. Today, our episode is a little bit different in that usually when we talk about relationships, we've kind of been talking mostly about like romantic relationships or friendships, but there's a huge domain that we have been missing, and that is the work relationship. Specifically, the relationship between people who are maybe leading a team, who are creating something together. What are those dynamics? What are some problems that may occur, and how can you better help yourselves and your teams? So, Kibby, start us off. What can you tell us about this topic?
I could tell you a lot. This is kind of both personal and professional now because, as you know, I moved into co-founding my own startup now. So we're doing a mental health company that focuses on entrepreneurs' business relationships, right? So, this is a kind of an announcement that we've never done before. I know that a lot of people have been interested in working with us as patients or clients of some sort, and now we're taking in Sion Health, my company, we're taking coaching clients that are entrepreneurs or otherwise business leaders that want to work on their business relationships, their working relationships. So if any of you out there interested, you can reach out to us. The easiest way is emailing me at Kibby, Kibby, at sionhealth.com, SEON health.com. So just starting off with that. So diving into that, we've done a lot of research on this topic, and it's so fascinating because I feel like ever since the pandemic, our social circles have really closed down, or maybe it's just because I'm like deep in my 30s, but basically I hear more and more that people's lives are just with their romantic partners, with their best friends, and their business partners. And I'm going to be talking mostly about startup co-founders, but I also mean anyone you professionally work with to create something, like a leadership team, as you said. You might be a business owner who has like a top employee, like a manager or something, or you're in a C-suite team or some kind of team where you guys are making like a work baby together. So I'm sure you've heard of like work husbands and work wives, and those relationships are intense. And when they explode, it gets just as personal and emotional as any other kind of breakup. So the more we talk to people about this, the more we have realized, oh my gosh, these people need help. And this is an area that we could really use our clinical skills and relationship coaching to help out with this group.
What do you see as the prime differences between these kinds of relationships and like a romantic relationship or a family?
Gosh, it's the differences seem to be smaller and smaller. I see more similarities, but at least this is what my life is like. And I've talked to a few people who are like this. I'm a mom. I spend all day kind of coordinating with my husband about who's going to do what in the house and who's on tonight, who's off tonight, who's not babysitting, taking care of the kid, or, taking out the trash, right? You're like delegating and acting as business partners, right? But then I also talk to my co-founders, and we're doing the same thing. Who's doing what? When are we meeting? Who's on? Who's off? Who's, expressing appreciation for each other, recognizing what the other person can do for you. So I'm seeing more and more similarities, and the differences are kind of small, but I think co-founding teams, co-leaders, just they're not together solely for the intimacy and the love and the happy, that kind of emotional attachment. Mm-hmm. That's not the primary reason why they come together. They come together because they want to make something together. But I can argue that romantic relationships are the same. You're coming together because you want to make a family.
Yeah.
But I think that the connecting force in romantic relationships is that feeling of like love, sexual attraction, intimacy, and the connecting force with co-leaders or co-founders are like, oh, we can make something together. We want to make the same thing. Let's do this. We have complementary skills. Let's make a partnership.
What are the kind of similar or different, for instance, like insecurities that you might see or conflicts that you might see that come from kind of internal, maybe doubts about yourself or personality processes?
Oh, a lot. It's almost like the same thing in my view. But it's like what's crazy is that co-founding teams come together like shotgun weddings. It's like, oh my gosh, we're both into the same thing and we're both passionate about the same thing. And you have a difference and I have a different, you have a set of skills. You're a technical person who could do this and are really good at details and data management and do all this stuff. And I do something else, right? And you get together, and it's the same thing with romantic couples. Like, oh, we want a family together. We want to travel. You are like this and it complements me. And so you get together, but co-founding teams do it like a shotgun wedding. Like you become legally bound right away. You sign a piece of paper and you do like sharing assets right off the bat. And there are a lot of insecurities with that. It's like, can I trust this person? Am I going to put in the same amount as they are? Like there's a lot of insecurity around, wow, like I quit my job and I'm putting in everything into this. And that other person still has a job, or they're still looking around for other opportunities, right? Like, are we in this together? Am I good enough for this team?
It's like
right?
Exclusivity.
It's the same thing. It's like, it's a lot of sacrifice. There's a lot of like commitment to each other and to the shared goal. So there's a lot of insecurity about that. And like, if I value something in building a company and the CEO or someone who's like, my partner who has slightly more power is interested in something else, can I advocate for what I want? Or I think I have an idea, can I advocate for that? So there's a lot of power dynamics. There's a lot of, saying no and setting boundaries and requesting things that can be just as complicated as in a marriage.
Yeah, it's an interesting point that you brought up is that teams like this have a hierarchical structure, even if it's 3 co-founders or something. Typically one is the CEO, it's like COO. And it seems like there's deference then to the CEO, which is different than marriage, although it's kind of like marriages of the past or some marriages of the present where the man is the head of the family. Is that something you've had personal experience with, or what kind of pitfalls can you see happening with that?
That's interesting. I think it kind of touches on things that we've talked about before with gender role differences and how things have changed and how that affects like marriage and relationships, where marriages in the past were so clearly, the roles were so clearly defined and power differentials were so clearly defined. The man is the breadwinner. He brings home the money and he's the one in charge. The wife is, and I'm being really stereotypical here, the wife is the head of the household and she does her thing. And like one of them is the boss that you all defer to. And then now it's a little bit more blended, right? People can do different things. And the same thing with co-leader teams, co-founding teams. There is that benefit that you write down on paper for these business relationships, like who has what role, like who's the CEO, who has this much equity, who's owning the business, who reports to whom. Yeah. So in good teams that actually is laid out. But if you're just like 2 or 3 people making a company, you're doing all sorts of stuff. You're doing all sorts of roles. You're all trying to sell the product. You're all trying to make something. You're trying to build this company together. And unless you're super, super clear who does what, there is a lot of territory battles, right? Like 2 people who have an ego and they think that they can sell and, like they're charismatic and they can, want to do the marketing, be the front man, right? Be on the, on the news, in the newspapers as like the main guy or the main woman. And, and so there's a lot of battles over like, who's going to be that? Who's going to be who doing the other stuff, right? So there's a lot of this like role confusion, but like territory battles. Yeah.
I could see how ego could get really involved. Like, for instance, the CEO typically gets the most attention. And in a sense, it's like they take credit for other team members' contributions because they're the figurehead of the company a lot of the time. And I can see how that would be frustrating for some people and a relief for others. Like, thank God I don't have to be the center of attention here.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting how the different formation of those kind of teams and romantic and friend couples can lead to different problems. Like, if there's an unequal relationship, like one's the CEO, one's the star, and the other co-founders or other leaders have less of a role, the issues that tend to break up that kind of team, those unequal teams, are problems with respect and recognition of other people's contribution, right? You have this like star, and then everyone else is like, wait a minute, why do I get less equity? I'm the one building the thing. I'm the one I'm the home making the household. Like, what is going on? Why aren't you respecting what I contribute to this, this relationship?
Yeah.
And like teams that are a little bit more equal have the opposite problem of like, might have different values and strategies, and they battle over how to do something right, like major decisions on where to go. So it's like kind of actually similar to, I keep saying this, any other relationship where the romantic couple, one has more power and the other one is like feels unappreciated. But if you have two alphas, two like strong people, it's like, who's going to win?
Yeah. I like when just bringing up the idea of more equal teams, I've seen that dynamic crumble several times. One was so the guy who brought me into UX design, who like poached me as a teenager. Yeah. It's very strange. He would always start these co-founding relationships with people, and the co-founders would always like leave so frustrated, and the friendships would crumble because the friend who got me into UX design, he would not do his part. But he would masquerade as if he was doing his part. And if there's not like a clear hierarchical structure, then that it just reminds me so much of like the marriage maybe that you were in, where it's like, do something, but I'm not your boss, so I can't order you to do something, but I'm so frustrated and resentful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh, how did that work? Did that guy ever take that in, like as feedback, or it just...
Our relationship ended when he cut off everyone in his life and moved to Hungary and stopped responding to all emails.
Cool. So
probably not.
went well. Yeah, I mean there's this really really cool book. I'll link it. It's like, why are so many incompetent men as leaders or something? It's such a good book because it basically says like the people who get to the top are people who tend to be good at selling themselves and self-promotion and taking credit for other people's work. And generally those are the people who, like, once they raise the money or get the promotion, they're not very good at executing a plan or managing a team. So you're really promoting the people who are like the least able to, do the job. Yeah.
That's such a good point. And kind of scary. It makes sense why you would want that kind of figurehead. The CEO does have to sell and be the face and be a charming, charismatic face who brings people in. But it's like the real boss has to be the COO or something.
Yeah. Well, it looks like that. It doesn't matter if you have those kind of different personalities. Obviously, it helps if like the leader does his job, right? But it matters if all the team members care about whether they care about the team versus themselves, right? Yeah. If they're more concerned with themselves and promoting themselves and being a star, to exploit, where they are, then everything falls apart. But if you have a flashy salesman who is the CEO or whatever, the face, he does his job, she does her job, and but they recognize that they need to respect and depend on the work of the quote like operators or builders who actually do like the operations, as long as they're also giving credit and like recognizing that this is a team effort. Like this is the classic is like the Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak team, where one of them is really good at commanding attention and communicating the vision, and the other one was doing. One of them was making the vision. So yeah, it's also called like visionary and integrator, like those two different personalities. Yeah, it's like the visionary has the ideas and they go out and really promote the ideas, and the other person like makes it happen.
Cool. So we talked about some pitfalls you can find. What if you are about to start a startup or a project? What are some things to keep in mind? Like, what kind of people you should choose, or what kind of like contracts need to be drawn up, or like, is there kind of a roadmap you could give?
Yeah. I mean, this is all this. There's really not as much research in this as it should be, but talking to all these people, I could kind of cobble together some insights. But definitely complementary skills is helpful, right? Like, it's not a bad thing if two people have the exact same skill set and are able to like make that work and hire the right people. But it seems to be that when the people who said they really liked their working relationship with their co-leaders or co-founders, they had a different skill set than their co-founders. Like, one was the numbers person and the other one was the communicator, right? Or they just one had the tech knowledge and the other one had the domain knowledge, right? One reason why I really like my co-founders is that Gian and Sida, they're AI engineers. They care about mental health. They are engineers and I'm the psychologist. So some of us have overlapping skills, but like, I have a different expertise than they do. So I couldn't possibly do this without them, right?
Yeah.
And vice versa, hopefully. But so someone who like complements your skills, and so together you guys can do most of the work together. And then people who have similar vision and values to you. And that's actually kind of hard to find, because you might say, oh yeah, we want to build the same project or team or company. But having the conversations of what that looks like how does that play out? What does success look like to you? Does it mean a huge money maker that just kind of does what it needs to do to make money? Or are you willing to sacrifice making money for innovation or slow growth or
value to the world or something?
Yeah, but like what you put out to the world. Like, do you want to just make a ton of money, or do you want to help certain people, right? So really talking through kind of like you would with dating, right? Just like what would success look like to you? What would a successful company look like to you? What are your deal breakers? Like, if this company had to do something that would make you want to leave, what would that be, right? And having all those conversations up front, like what are your roles? What do you like to do? What do I like to do? What are you good at? What am I good at? So separating like passions from skills and really understanding like, okay, the ideal is like if we're each doing what we're good at and what we love. But really we should do what we're really good at, right? To like differentiate that. And so like having all these conversations early, seeing how those conversations go. Do you feel like bulldozed? Do you feel like you have like a say? And that was something that was really important with my co-founders. We had these conversations early, and my CEO, Gian, like was very transparent with how he made decisions. And he was like, I'm following these principles. What do you think about that? What are your concerns? Like, what are your concerns about me and you, right? It's like, it's really dating. It's really treating it like you're dating, and maybe do some work with them to see what it's like to work with them, right? Like other things to look out for are, do you have the same idea of like working style and expectation? Just kind of like your romantic relationships of like love languages, right? Like, how do you show love? How do you show care and dedication? It's the same thing with work relationships. How do I show you that I'm showing up here? Does it mean I'm doing this full time and I'm not entertaining any other side jobs? Does this mean that I'm working 24 hours a day every day? Does it mean that we're doing, personal hangouts with the team too, right? It's like, how are we showing that we care and that we're really in it together? So all of these things early on, which people don't usually do. I
was going to say, it's such good advice. And I'm like, I can just see how like 98% of people don't do this.
Yeah. This goes for any kind of collaboration. I mean, it's crazy how we were so careful about romantic relationships and friends. We date for a long time. We are socialized to have, I mean, if in best scenarios, you're socialized to have the talk of, what do you want out of family in the future? Where do you want to live? What do you value? What's your political leaning? Like, what's all these things that in our minds we're like, this is what is important for forming a family unit together. And with co-founders and co-leaders, like, we don't. We're just like, did you go to a good school? Do you have a good resume? Do you fulfill the things that I need? Okay, great. Let's do this. But
yeah, well, I'd imagine, I mean, this seems somewhat easier to do when you are, for instance, working in like a co-working space and you meet somebody and you're networking and you can have these conversations. I can imagine coming in for a job. And of course, I've never been in a C-suite, so I don't know what it's like for a COO to be interviewed. These kinds of conversations are probably more, feel easier and more appropriate. Mm-hmm. But I can imagine coming in for an interview, that's your opportunity to ask these questions and talk about these things. And people are so concentrated on just getting the offer that the full honesty doesn't come out. And the real questions don't get asked or answered. Yeah,
I've heard really pretty ugly founder breakups because, you just want an opportunity. You just, if you're in the interviewing position, you're just trying to show the best foot forward. But gosh, I've heard now, talking to more and more people, just hearing like really painful emotional breakups, friendships that have been broken up. I was talking to one founder who started a company with a really good friend, and this friend and her ended up being too similar, she said. Like, looking back on it, she was like, we were just we brought a similar skill set. And I think she was like, looking back on it, I don't think we respected each other, because in my mind, I thought I could do that. I could do what you're doing. And so there was a little bit of passive aggressiveness about, like, if they had to do something neither of them wanted to do, like, who did that and who was left with like the jobs that they didn't want, and getting annoyed if that other person messed up their job because it was like, I could have done that better kind of thing. And they start to see that what happens often is, like, there's a burnout, right? That one of the co-leaders or co-founders tend to be withdrawn. They're not communicating. They're taking more time for themselves outside of work, right? Or just full on shut down and like not communicating. And so they had it out, and it just is like a divorce. Like, then it becomes sometimes a little messy, where then they go, okay, well, one of us is going to leave, like, buy me out, give me my due money for what I contributed to this team, right? And that friendship was broken up now. I mean, it's just... Yeah,
someone very close to me had the problem wasn't that they were too similar, but it was an identical situation in the sense that it broke up a lifelong friendship very quickly, like under a year. And, they had to do the payout, and there's a ton of resentment around that, because it's like, you worked for my company for a very short period of time. You were impossible to work with during that entire time. You were very disrespectful, and now I have to pay you $30,000. Oh my God. It's a smaller company, but that is there any advice about, like, whether you should start a company with friends or whether that's best for strangers?
Yeah, there's a lot of amazing companies that are started as friends, but I feel like that's tricky. I've heard more stories about the friends breaking up. Not to say that it's the wrong thing, but I think what happens, if I'm going to guess, I talked to this really awesome researcher, Dr. Nicola Thomas, who's in University of Sheffield. She studied co-founder relationships and actually studied them from like a couples therapy framework. Like she replicated Gottman's research on married couples and did exactly that with co-founding teams. It's so cool. And she found that the ones who tend to break up actually had more positive emotional expression in the beginning of their talks, and more task conflict, like arguments over how to do a task. Whereas like in married couples, the research shows that the more negative emotion you show in
Yeah.
those interactions like leads to divorce. But she was so surprised to find that positive affect is the problem, positive emotion. Like they just seem happier. And the people who seemed happier, more positive, are the ones who left.
Is it conflict avoidance?
Yeah. So I think I'm putting together that finding with the other people I talked to, like my friend I just mentioned who broke up with their friend as co-founder. She said that in the beginning they're friends, so you don't want to say the ugly things you need to say. And actually fights in this kind of like co-leadership team are not bad. They don't actually predict the downfall. It's actually like holding back all of these resentments and things that you want to talk about, but you're like, oh no, this is my friend. I can't possibly tell her my concerns. I can't possibly tell her that I actually want this role, or I think the equity split is unfair, or the work distribution is unfair. Like I want to just keep the peace.
Yeah.
That seems to be pretty deadly for these relationships, which makes sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like I have a similar issue with my marriage sometimes. Like we were friends for so long that a lot of what we worked on is like whenever we're mad at each other or upset, we tend to suppress it, because it's like we're kind of like we're so careful about our relationship that's like now our best friend and marriage that we don't want to rock the boat. So we're like more likely to hide what we're feeling, like the negative feelings. Like
I know. I'm like sitting here thinking about all the ways in which I would be a bad co-founder because of this. Like, what if we just avoid the conflict and then like we'll just work around it and that.
Yeah. Actually, you were here. You saw it last night where Alex revealed. I know. I called him out publicly in front of us and our friends that he doesn't like our couch, and we got it in like several months ago. And he has been keeping it a secret that he doesn't like the couch that we got. So that it was like this big marital secret that he's been holding.
Oh my God, I missed this somehow.
You did? You were there. Oh no. Yeah, you weren't paying attention because it was like a deep marriage reveal that our like hidden conflict that he's been hiding from me. And he was like, I feel like I'm admitting an affair that I'm having. I don't like the couch.
The way it looks or too bad.
He doesn't like the way it feels.
Interesting. It's so comfortable. Okay.
I agree.
Yeah. And I'm also thinking of starting something like a private practice where kind of by definition you and your co-founders have largely the same skill sets. Obviously there are deviations. But if you're all psychologists, there's probably a good bet that you're good interpersonally, you're empathic, you're good at the same major skill, and then it's the kind of 10% that differs. Like, are you better than me at administrative tasks? Okay, you still kind of suck at those, but you're better than me. Okay, I guess that's yours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then if you don't have that, then you have to make enough money to hire someone to do that, right?
Yes.
So that's why like the people that you decide as business partners having complementary skills is important, because if you have the same skill, it could work, but in the beginning when you don't have money to hire like an admin person, like one of you guys are going to have to do the admin.
I know. Thank you, Carly, again for being the complementary skill set to give you me. Yeah.
Yeah, she holds us together, literally.
So so really thinking about complementary skill sets, having the conversations up front, and maybe having a conversation of like, I know that we are not going to want to hurt each other's feelings and damage our relationship, but we have to kind of create some sort of strategy or safe space around conflict. I
think opening up a place for conflict. And because you're really seeing that conflict isn't bad. It's really how, even in the couples therapy research, it's not about whether you fight. Fights are normal in any relationship. It's how you fight. Do you respect the other person? Do you still have do you express positive things and appreciation for that person as you fight? Do you resolve the conflict in a way where you come to a compromise, or do you is one person just bulldozing the other one? So, I mean, that's part of what we want to do with our coaching services is just really be the bad guy in a way. And so you don't have to start the conflict. So we come in and we could just say, hey, okay, we got to talk about this now. who has what role, you know?
That's a pretty good sell for a coach, because I can imagine really not wanting to be the initiator of that. Be like, hey, guess what? I brought this person in who's going to help us figure this out. Okay, now you ask the hard questions.
Yeah, it's kind of like asking for a prenup as you're getting married, right? This same feeling of like, oh, we're doing this together. This is so exciting. Also, how much is mine? How much of this is mine and how much is yours, right? It gets kind of like, you know, awkward, and people avoid those conversations, and then they really regret it later because the differences or like misunderstandings in that dynamic can really get ugly.
When should you get a coach, or like what are the things that kind of clue you into your need for one?
Yeah, it's really interesting to see, because it's kind of like I keep linking it to couples therapy. Couples therapy and like coaching would be better in the beginning, right? It would be better when you first start your marriage, you first start your work marriage, right away, to be able to talk through these things while you're still in the honeymoon phase, while you still like each other and want the best for each other, talking about these really hard conversations early on, right? What are your values? What's your vision? Why would you leave? What are situations that would prevent you from like working? What does working look like to you?
Yeah.
Like, what roles you have, right? All those things early on. But people don't do that, right? This is like preventative mental health care. Most people don't do things preventatively, right? They don't take care of themselves until things are too bad.
Yeah.
What we have seen is this, you know, these co-founder teams form. They're in honeymoon phase. They don't get a coach, and then they raise some money, and then they go, oh shit, I have to start building out this team. Or apparently around this time, when you build a company, the founders start to think about autonomy. You start to think about, what do I want to do with my team or my division or whatever, and what do you want to do separately? Same thing for married couples. You make a kid, and then you're like, how do I live my life as an independent person, right? Like we're in it together, but like I also want to express my individuality here.
Yeah.
And that's when a lot of people do get a coach, because they have to start to developing themselves as a leader, right? And so that's either when it happens or when you're like at the brink of a co-founder breakup, right? The person is like shutting down, not participating in meetings. They're getting argumentative in the, you know, decision-making Zoom meetings. Things don't go anywhere. They peace out, right? That's when people get help and go, oh, help me. Like, I don't know what to do. We have, you know, like a company, you know, money, assets on the line, and I can't let everything drop. Like, please help me with this. Help me save this.
Sure. So it seems like there's a lot of upfront work you can do, but that people typically don't do. So this is a big plug for that. And then you can get a coach. What are some maybe tips or strategies you can use if you start noticing these conflicts arising, like once you've already kind of built your team and product?
Getting a coach, right? Yeah. That's a good tip. I think being... you know, sometimes it's a matter of getting your own therapy or coach to kind of understand how this could be triggering for you. Like, I see that a lot, where it's the same thing in my divorce too, where something that the other person is doing, or like, you know, them shutting down or conflicts can bring up stuff from yourself, like imposter syndrome. Maybe this is my fault, like self-blaming, or, you know, you get emotional really quickly. So kind of like noticing what this brings up for you and saying like, oh gosh, like I'm so conflict avoidant, and I could see that my co-founder and I are just like going in different directions, but I don't want to address it. I just want to keep the peace. So noticing what's coming up for you. And then really, I think one of the things that, at least in these teams, the big sign that you're kind of breaking down, the dynamic is breaking down, is if you can't execute on decisions. You go back and forth, people get lost in what the final decision is. You make a decision, but you're all upset about it because you don't feel like your opinion was, you know, mattered. So really tracking how decisions are made, and noticing like, how do I feel about it? How does that go? And then one tip that is always good, even if you don't have a coach, is regular check-ins. This is borrowed from couples therapy, or maybe it's just like used across teams in general. A weekly or regular check-in about how things are going, right? Highlighting the good stuff, like expressing appreciation for what the other person did, celebrating and really saying like, hey, I noticed you did this huge thing and contributed to our recent milestone. Thank you so much. And then talking about some concerns, like doing a dear man skill, right? Or just like asking the other people, you know, hey, I noticed that I've been kind of taking on this task a lot and it's really burning me out a little bit. Can one of you or you take it next week, right? So like really doing regular check-ins so that you have a structure for bringing up the dynamic and bringing up problems with the dynamic instead of it just coming out because you're angry.
Yeah, so say it in the union address.
Yeah.
I feel like I've seen so many companies where, you know, some of the co-founders get along well, but the ship is a little shaky because, and in my experience, it's been the CEO that is the problem and has this power differential. So everyone kind of has to defer to them, but also has a big ego. And so then there's this struggle with like the other C-suite execs being like, I know it would be good for the company, but it's so hard to get that across to this person, but this person is technically in charge. And I can see that being a really, really rough dynamic because you have a good product. So clearly the team has worked in many ways.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's hard to be completely level with the patriarch, matriarch, or whatever of the company.
Yeah, for sure. Power dynamics is such a big thing in all relationships, right? There's always like someone who holds power in a different way than the other person. No team is completely, or marriage can be completely equal. And the CEO is just like a clear example of someone who just has the power. Unfortunately in those scenarios, if the CEO is really not performing or just cares only about him or herself, they get replaced. That's why like in these bigger companies, sometimes the original founding team is swapped out by someone else who's like a professional CEO who, comes in and does the job for them. Yeah, there's like a vote. There's a vote outside of the CEO, and that's kind of why those work. That you don't want all the power to be in one person because they could, because the focus should be on what's best for the company. As soon as you get into what's best for this person and their ego, you're lost, right?
Yeah.
You're making the whole team just basically soothe one person's ego, and that's just not going to work.
Sometimes that can seem like that's best for the company because it's like, okay, if I can just soothe the ego, then we can get back to business as usual. And
I saw this other research study that says like, what if you have like a genius CEO or leader who's just like amazing in their field, amazing what they do, but they're just impossible. It's like, those actually you could kind of prop those people up for a while, but eventually those people become a liability. Yeah. So as soon as they lose the team first attitude, you got to get rid of them because they're going to cost the company, money and time and effort. So I think that if you have a good team, a good CEO, it's really having a good system. You put in place a good check system, regular check-ins and regular feedback, right? And it's tough because I don't know, many people in business are narcissists and they don't want to get feedback. And that's where executive coaches step in because then they get that feedback and deliver it in really honest ways. And that's that honestly, by the research, feedback is the number one helpful thing. Is
okay, that's a big scary word. That word, yeah.
And of course, the people who are the worst, the people who need the feedback the most are the least likely to take it in, right? And then if someone's just impossible, they just get replaced. But having at least a equal system of feedback where all the team members are able to give feedback to each other, that's like a healthy dynamic. If that's not allowed, or people are scared,
Right.
and they have these like secret text message chain grouped about like how much they hate the blah blah blah, it's lost. That's got to be broken down.
I'm just glad I'm an independent worker about to be.
You have faces too. That's a thing. Everyone gets into this like, I'm going to start my own company to avoid all this, but then you have to. You might hire as like an assistant at some point, or you might like join a group practice, or there's a lot of these solo business owners who still have to work with people. Right?
Well, my plan is to hire an assistant that's actually my boss. So, like, I can fire them. They can't fire me, but they have to tell me how to live my life and run my business, and I'll listen.
Fine.
Unless I don't want to listen anymore, then
that is going to be an easy dynamic.
Anywho, this podcast isn't about me, so
we'll get there. How about I'll coach you once you're there, or the person that you're working with.
Yeah, here's how to deal with Jacqueline. Is she being a tyrant? Okay. Okay, so from your side now, what maybe are some scenarios that you would help with, or what would you do to help these dynamics?
Yeah, we would help with all stages of this, the team formation, having those hard conversations, dealing with this kind of brewing conflict with your team members, and then kind of mediating breakups if it comes to that. Knock on wood. Yeah, I mean, I think that the more I understand this problem, the more I like love this kind of this entrepreneur community, or these like business leader communities. I see that so much of what we talk about in our podcast, like all these relationship skills and insights and tips, can actually really help them. And I don't have a lot of experience with executive coaches for myself, but I don't think they've had the same kind of clinical training of understanding like how to do behavior change. Yeah, they don't have these evidence-based frameworks that we have been trained in. A lot of them are very good, but a lot of them are previous like executives that kind of like learn how to do these kind of some of these like clinical and motivational skills, but they don't. We have more training in like how to actually like improve these things. So yeah, I mean, we would definitely customize and figure out what skills people need for what their goals are. Whether it's I want to be able to have my team really listen to my side, and I want to advocate for myself. I want to work with someone who's like very difficult, but we kind of need them on board. We are clashing in vision or decisions, and it's going back and forth, and these Zoom meetings are just going round and round, and nothing's really decided, and we're not moving forward. Like all these things, we step in and kind of do what I would do in therapy. We would do an assessment of really understanding deeply all the different issues, using all these different cool methods, and then making a treatment plan, which is basically like what skills are going to be helpful to get you to where your goals are. Yeah. And then really understanding like what would success look like here, like when you have the best functioning team, like what would you want that to look like? What would you want to get out of this partnership? Yeah, and then implementing it, right? Like Word right now, we had such a cool combination of me, the coach, like using my clinical skills and interpersonal skills, and then we also have these AI engineers who can make these customized digital tools. So, I mean, we could do lots of different stuff, but we'd be able to like look at LinkedIn and your social media and figure out your personality and roles, and you could even take like your conversations or chats that you give and kind of analyze like what's going on here and how can you like what can you do to like reduce conflict, or how do you resolve this, right? Yeah. And then like sessions with me, so I really make sure that people feel heard and really understand their side, so it's like really implemented in their working environment. So yeah, we're doing like kind of a multi-pronged approach, and it's really exciting because it's like It's such a great time now to start your own company or to start a project. I mean, I know the economy is crazy, but there's a lot of people who are laid off and they're just like dying to like be their own boss and do their own thing and make their own business. And it's scary and it's hard. But when you have a good partner in crime, like when you and your partner like really feel solid, it feels like family. It feels like it feels like you're taking on the world together in the same way that, you know, any other close support you have. And you get to create and you get to like put your stamp on like what you believe in the world. And then it just is like, it could be very magical. It could be like a really amazing experience. Even if, you know, your company doesn't do as well as you thought, or you end up pivoting or doing something completely different, like, my experiences with my co-founders and my business partners in the past have been so rewarding that I've just enjoyed the whole ride. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm just like
No,
saying
yeah,
like
what I've been thinking this whole time is how kind of surprising it is that this isn't much more common practice, or that even, you know, going through psychology training, like mostly we do individual work. Some people get to do couples work, but and couples work is obviously so relevant to executive coaching, but it's like there's not a designated therapy or kind of therapist you go to for co-founders or even friendships. And yet this relationship is so high stakes. Like your money is on the line, your job is on the line, your vision, your sense of fulfillment through your work. And like other people's jobs are on the line.
Yeah. 65% of startups fail because of co-founder conflicts. Most startups fail because of what we're talking about right now. A lot of it is like if you have a crappy idea or like you just bad economy, but like most of it is like you guys can't get along. And yeah, like this is your livelihood. This is like your profession. It's like one of the like huge domains in your life. And I agree. I was just shocked by people who were trying to find, well, there was a New York Times article in 2015 talking about like Genius.com co-founders actually went to couples therapy to work on their co-founder relationship. Yeah. And it's sort of become more popular in Silicon Valley to have like a couples therapist for your founding team. But there's really not like a niche for it. It's almost kind of like cobbling together solutions. But yeah, that's what we're trying to do, trying to like fill that gap and be like, no, like there should be relationship solutions for like your business relationships, because that is so important these days and probably ever.
I almost wonder if there's a resistance because, I mean, people resisted couples therapy for so long. Almost of like no, I don't want to bring emotion into this work, into my work. I don't want to, our problems are organizational, or they're not because we can't communicate. Like I can almost see, maybe this is because the teams I've worked on have been led by men, but
yeah. I think you're getting that. I think you're getting the point.
But
female founders or investors are like, oh yeah, this is a huge problem. Male, they're a little different.
Well, I mean, that statistic is so significant. I mean, for such an entrepreneurial capitalist country as the United States, like if anybody knew that, or if more people knew that 65% of startups fail because of co-founder relationship issues, then it's just like, get a coach. Like, what are you doing? Get one immediately. Like, that's the number one thing. If the majority of companies fail for a single reason, you'd think that would be the first thing that you would tackle, the first thing you would confront. Yeah. But then you're more, exactly. I mean, I wonder if it's the male bias because even now, if I were to talk to a therapist about problems with my relationship in my marriage, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to talk about my marriage with Alex, right? Like, my home life is dependent on this relationship. When I have if I have a problem with my co-founders, I would talk about, I have a problem with work. Work is really stressful. Yeah. But it's still like this very personal, close attachment, right? Mm-hmm. And we just don't think of it that way. We just think of it as like work, or I'm performing in a business sense or professional sense, but you don't think about that a lot of it is down to like you are creating something with another person. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, if I ever start a startup, I'll know what to do.
You'll start a practice. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
you'll get there. Hey, we're a co-founding team. What are you talking about? This is like,
Who's our counselor, Kitty, or our coach?
it can't be me. I can't do a double role like that.
Well, yeah, and the one time we almost failed was because of a relationship issue.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's significant. Okay, cool. Well, so once again, can you tell us where people who are looking for this service can find you?
So yeah, we're opening up a few slots for clients who are entrepreneurs or business owners or leaders of a team that want help with their business relationships, with their partners, co-founders, C-suite team, or, just reach out if you're interested in relationship coaching in general. So that's what we're doing. And you could find us www.seonhealth.com, SEON health.com. Fun fact, our CEO is Korean, and Sun, SEON, is the word for like good-natured or like the best in you, or honest. So yeah. So seonhealth.com, or email me at Kibby, Kibby @seonhealth.com. So I'll put that on the show notes too. So yeah,
Fabulous.
Just reach out. Even if you're curious and want to talk to me about it, I'd love to connect to people about this.
Awesome. Well, helpers, Kibby and I just said we don't have a coach, and we need to reevaluate that. But for now, you all could make us happy and make our podcast venture a success by giving us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and tell us why we're so great and why we're such a great team. But no negative feedback. I'm just kidding. Please let us know what you would like to see more of, what you've enjoyed, what we could do a better job at, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. By accessing this podcast, I acknowledge that the hosts of this podcast make no warranty, guarantee, or representation as to the accuracy or sufficiency of the information featured in this podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast and any and all content or services available on or through this podcast are provided for general, non-commercial informational purposes only and do not constitute the practice of medical or any other professional judgment, advice, diagnosis, or treatment, and should not be considered or used as a substitute for the independent professional judgment, advice, diagnosis, or treatment of a duly licensed and qualified healthcare provider. In case of a medical emergency, you should immediately call 911. The hosts do not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast, and information from this podcast should not be referenced in any way to imply such approval